Am I the wizard man? Well, let's see. Did I single-handedly slay the twin ice dragons of Powdervale Lake? Yes, I did. Am I the wizard man? Well, let's see. Did I single-handedly defend the castle of Kalimdor from an undead army? Yes, I did. Am I the wizard man? Well, let's see. Did I transform myself into a giant in order to single-handedly rescue the princess and her fiancé from a hive of angry thunder titans who wanted to put them in a goddamn stew? Yes, I did. Am I the wizard man? Well, let's see. Even though I'm not a blacksmith, did I forge the arc blade because I'm the only person in the realm who can channel that much fell energy without burning to a crisp? Yes, I did. So yeah, I'm the motherfucking wizard man. Now who the fuck are you?
He knows who he is, do you?
If you ever touch my staff again, I'll break your fucking hands. Capiche?
Turn your dial. Dapper Don's here to make you smile with a co-host sharp and riff so true. We've got the laughs, the rants, the view. What's going on? Oh, what's the word? Indy's the city where we'll be heard. From Monument Circle to Broad Ripple on. What's going on with Dapper Don? So grab your coffee, Hoosiers, and let's get to it. 'Cause we're in the house!
What's going on? It's Dapper Don, and I'm excited to welcome you all back. People flock to fantasy, as the name suggests, for an escape. They go for the dragons, the witches, the fights, the hero winning against all odds, and that's why media keeps shoving it down our fucking throats. But what happens when an author looks at this trend and says, fuck you, I'm gonna do it my way? What happens when fantasy starts to strip away the comfort and complacency and leave you with a feeling of dread for what's coming next? What happens when our gritted reality starts to seep into our stories? Our guest today answers exactly that question. Everybody welcome author Richard Spegal to the show. Say hi to the people, introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. I love doing this kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. Pleasure to be here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's very nice to meet you. So let's talk about the origins of your writing. When did you first realize that you had a problem with the way fantasy and supernatural stories were told?
Probably as early as high school, honestly. That was when I started writing originally. Maybe it was a few years after high school that I actually gave up completely, and that's when I kind of settled on doing it myself.
Mm-hmm. And what sparked you to kind of want to solve that problem by going public with your own stories?
Well, originally it wasn't for the public; it was for me because I wanted entertainment and I wasn't finding it. So I decided to do it myself. And then years down the road, I decided, all right, let me try this whole publishing thing and put my stuff out there for everybody else.
All right. Can you hear me again?
I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. I don't know what that was. But yeah, so tell me, what exactly were the problems that you were having with the modern fantasy genre?
Well, it started primarily with like the vampire genre. I grew up reading like Anne Rice and stuff like that, and I enjoyed it, but there was nothing after her. Everything that was being done for a much younger audience, and I'm a grown-up, and I think grown-ups should have entertainment too. So I set out to write something for grown-ups again.
Mm. And I know that you said you spent some time in the military. Did that play any role in your writing principles at all?
It did help a lot with, especially with my Eternal Night series, because that's set in the modern world. So having the military experience gives me a lot of experience with like equipment and weapon systems and things like that. So I know what the character is using, so it can be a lot more realistic. In the fantasy genre, it helped a little bit with formations and things like that when it comes to like the military action sequences. So it does lend a lot of credibility to the writing.
Mm. And do you think that that's something that a lot of modern fantasy doesn't get wrong? They just kind of start, with the epic fights, the beam struggles, and all that stuff, and characters getting thrown into mountains. Is that kind of where fantasy starts to go wrong?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's just a mess, and the action sequences, they're just a mess. I mean, they don't make they don't make any sense. And you can in visual media, it's tough because people are seeing it, so they can see the garbage. In written
Right.
in written media, you can gloss over it, and if the rest of your story is okay, you can get by. But I go into it in detail because I can do it realistically, and I think people really like that. So I want to show it to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know you've said before that there are some things that you kind of can hand wave away, but like, what are some things that you absolutely would refuse and would advise other writers refuse to hand wave away?
Characters have to be real. It's writing 101, and it's something the entire industry gave up on about 20 years ago. Characters have to be real. They can't pander to the audience. They're not mouthpieces of the creator. They're just their own real people, and they grow organically, and the characters are the ones that tell the story.
Absolutely. From the way you're speaking, it sounds like you've seen plenty of Marvel movies where it feels like the movie just kind of stops for, hey, I'm a woman and I'm kicking somebody. Look.
Yeah, it's a mess. Marvel's probably one of the biggest examples in recent times, but the whole thing's just a mess.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now you've said you've done a ton of research into crafting, your world. What is your research process and how do you ensure accuracy?
A lot of my research is only really for like the background flavor kind of information. The world sort of just grows organically on its own. When it came to the fantasy, I didn't have to do much research at all. That's the beauty of fantasy. You can just make it all up and it's just wonderful on its own. When it came for the stuff for the modern world, like I said, my military experience paid off a lot. A lot of my upcoming work is going to be science fiction, so that's a tremendous amount of research. It's really just a lot of reading and searching just to make sure that everything makes sense. Because just because it's fiction doesn't mean it shouldn't at least be realistic. You got to get the science right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the feeling comes from being able to put yourself in that character's shoes. Nobody can relate to throwing cars and piecing apart mountains and shit.
Right.
I mean, unless, I don't know, Richard, you got some kind of secret power I don't know about?
Well, that's why I made my main characters married. That's the relatable part of it right there. The fact that they're actually a married couple dealing with everything that they're dealing with. That's the hook, because I've never seen that done before with vampires.
No, it's always the vampire love interest that's secluded and kept off to the side, or they go straight horror, but they never really go into the perspective of a vampire at all, at least not accurately. Because I'm not counting Twilight as any type of fantasy story at all. I barely even count it as fiction.
Oh my God. I didn't want to say it, but yeah. that's
So if this show,
genre.
yeah, this I know it's an insult to your genre. I know it hurts to wake up and know that if you put vampires in your story, people are going to start comparing it, at least in part, to Twilight. And it could be one of the best stories out there, but people will still make that comparison. She ruined it.
You know, I want them to make that comparison because I want to be the anti-Twilight, because Twilight destroyed the genre for everyone because it was geared towards 13-year-old girls and it made $1 bajillion, so everybody else made their vampire stuff the same way. So the entire genre was ruined for adults from that point onward.
Right. And I do like what you do with the vampires in your world. They kind of have this interesting kind of almost eldritch presence to them. Like, for example, the where did you get the idea for them like having blood as an energy source, but them not like, it's not flowing through their veins or anything. They're just like blood reserves. Where'd you get that idea from?
I had to try and come up with like a scientific way to explain things down the road. It doesn't come up right away because I have to eventually explain what vampires are. So they do use blood. And I was very loose with the way that it was applied to their bodies because I wanted to give the readers a chance to introduce themselves to the characters before I got crazy scientific with all the reasoning down the road. So the way their bodies work is actually explored in later books as they kind of experiment on themselves and stuff like that. I just don't kind of want to spoil too much of it.
Right. No, I get it. And we're not spoiling anything on the we're not spoiling anything on the show. Get the book, which we'll be talking about more in depth later. But I do want to dive into your writing style real quick because there were some interesting things that I noticed that I want to get your takes on. For example, people praise your stories for feeling brutal, but not just being edgy for edgy's sake. So where do you draw the line between a darker story, a grittier story, and just plain misery porn?
I don't really draw any lines. I go where the story goes. Everything grows organically from the characters, and the characters are real. They're living and telling their own story, and they suffer through the obstacles and conflicts that they have to live through. And that's what takes them into darker places because that's how the world works. Like nobody's immune to stress and things like that. So, you know, your heroes can't save the world with a smile on their face. That's not how the world works. They suffer for it. And my heroes go through horrible situations, and it causes them severe mental problems. They go through psychotic breaks and all sorts of suffering, and I go and I explore all of those darker areas.
Wow. So you keep it it's like what somebody would realistically go through in these circumstances. Realistically, people in war aren't like for Valhalla and just like enjoying the slaughter. Most people that went to war hated it. They adapted to it, but they hated it.
That's correct. Yeah. And the way things are depicted in media and all forms of media and stuff, it's fake. And everybody knows it's fake. So it really hurts your immersion. So I want a story where the characters have to live real lives and people can go through that journey with them. And it's not always a positive journey, but it's real.
Right. Absolutely. And, you know, kind of piggybacking off of that, you've said that perfect characters that just kind of overcome everything that comes their way. Maybe they'll be hit by something, but they'll just get back up with a grunt, power up, and fix it. You said that those tend to feel fake. So what does a real character feel like to you?
Well, that actually can get kind of difficult because my primary characters are in that realm of, they are essentially superheroes. They have so much power. They're so old. They can do just about anything. So it's tough to write characters like that and still have any kind of tension and suspense because, well, you're just waiting, like they're obviously going to win. So it takes a certain kind of skill to actually still have tension in those scenes. And in the first couple of books that are out there, the way that tension is built is when they get separated and have to act on their own, and when they can't save themselves and things like that. And you see the reliance on them together, where rather than being able to survive as individuals.
Man, that's a very interesting dynamic, because too, married couples in media are often, if they're functional, they're often portrayed as joined as one in the hip, just completely united. But I know you've had your characters have argued, your characters have had psychotic breaks, your characters are at a point in their relationship now where they could go days, weeks even without speaking to each other. And I just thought that was very interesting. So what was kind of your impetus for writing it that way?
Well, when you think about it, I mean, they've been together from the point of the first book. They've been together for over 900 years. So at that point, they don't really need to shove romance in each other's faces. They've been together for so long, it doesn't need to be spoken. That's why it's not the kind of romance that like maybe the teen audience would like. It's the kind of romance that people with more mature tastes understand, because it's just there in the background. Yeah, they bicker and all that nonsense like any married couple, but when it comes down to it, they're always there for one another. And they can't, and as individuals, anytime they're separated, they almost completely fall apart. Like they're completely worthless unless they're together, because they've been together for so long, they don't know how to operate as individuals anymore.
Right. So this is the kind of story that somebody who's maybe been married 20 years, maybe had a couple kids, maybe they moved out. This is the type of romance that they would kind of gel with.
Oh, yeah. People with long-term experience, they're going to see the romance all over the place. The characters are married, they're husband and wife first, they're vampire second. And that's how the story goes.
And again, that's an extremely interesting angle. What is your process for writing a character in both of your series? What's been your process?
Well, a lot of it is that I'm crazy. So a lot of the stuff just sort of happens. No, I'm saying a lot of the stuff just sort of happens in my brain, and it's just sort of there. Like when I get, because all these series are, the scope is enormous. So when a new character crops up, for me, it's exciting. Like it's almost like a new kid is born or whatever. There's this new amazing character that I'm meeting for the first time, and I'm seeing all of this character's traits and stuff like that, and I'm winding them into the book with all the other characters, and it's really exciting. But I don't have as much conscious control over it as most people think. It just sort of happens, and I just write down what I see happening.
Absolutely. And that's very interesting, because I know most people cite like an inspiration, or they cite something that they saw in their past, or they might even cite a past experience. But for you, it's just, well, here's another guy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's coming from somewhere in my subconscious. Things just pop up, and I love it, and I just go with it. I get emotionally attached to these characters, which makes it's hard as hell when they die. But things happen, and sorry, but death is permanent in my writing. I don't do silly things where they keep coming back to life for no reason. So that happens, and that sucks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's necessary, because, I mean, learning how to deal with loss is something that media doesn't often teach us. Because if you lose the mascot character, you lose money.
Yeah. But then people, they lose faith in what they're seeing, because it's just not, it just adds to how fake everything is. I mean, when the story has to grow organically, and sometimes the way the story grows, characters don't make it. And I've actually found myself trying to rewrite scenes to keep people alive because I don't want them to die. But it just comes across as fake. I just have to let it happen.
Right. I mean, for one thing, your villains wouldn't be able to be taken seriously if they literally couldn't kill the main character at all. Like if they had no ability to kill main characters or anybody around them permanently, then your audience is just wondering, okay, why is he fighting this guy again? Why not just kill him since he can't kill you?
Exactly. Yeah. And then with the main series, with the Eternal Nights, with the main series where it's going into science fiction and everything, the cast of characters expands exponentially because the scope is enormous. So yeah, people are fighting left and right, they're dying left and right, and it's heartbreaking, but it's got to happen.
Absolutely. And, firstly, this has been a debate that I've heard for a while. Do you write the world first or do you write the characters first? Which one do you think is the better approach?
Yeah, you have to sketch out both. It depends. Like in fantasy, you have to sketch out the world because you're making it all up from scratch. So you got to have some kind of sketch out there. And then you let the characters fill in the rest of the world. If you're doing something that's set in like the normal modern world, then you can leave the world building alone for a minute and you can start with the characters and let them create the world for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes sense. Especially with fantasy stories, you can tell when somebody's just making up rules as they go along.
Yeah. Yeah, it's painfully obvious in most series that they just, with each successive book, there's all of a sudden all this new crap that wasn't in the book before, and then it's like, well, what the hell's going on?
Exactly. And I know you've said that if you're just going to make shit up, to at least do it the right way. So what does making shit up the right way kind of look like for you when you're consuming fantasy?
Well, you got to come up, like I said, you got to at least sketch out the basic world. And if we're talking about fantasy, there's going to be some rules. You have to have those rules be obvious. They need to be explained at some point. Like you can sprinkle the exposition around or whatever, but it has to make sense. And then you just stick with it. And then at that point, it becomes the real world. And then the characters just have their adventures. When you continuously change it, book after book after book, then all you're doing is advertising the fact that you didn't have a clue to begin with.
Absolutely. You see that that's a trope that happens in anime commonly. They'll go on for 1,000+ episodes. They'll explain the world one way, and then they'll suddenly get the idea, and then they'll gaslight the readers into thinking that's what they always did think.
Yeah. Now, the thing is, if you come up with a new idea, if you introduce it into the world as something new, then everything's fine. But nobody ever does that. They introduce it as if it was something that always existed, but we're just seeing it for the first time. And that's when the world falls apart.
Absolutely. Because, and then that, I've seen people make videos going back. Well, if this character always had this power, why the fuck didn't he use it against this villain?
Yeah. You basically just destroyed the entire Harry Potter franchise.
Well,
Every as wonderful as those books were, every book introduced concepts that destroyed the previous books. Every single one.
absolutely. And the movies were no better because
Oh my God, yeah.
there's already a decline in quality automatically from taking a book and putting it into a movie. So now imagine that you have a series of books that gets shittier and shittier and movies that basically multiply off of that.
Yeah. I don't blame the author, I blame the editor. Whoever edited those books should be fired because they should have said, like, these are all great ideas, but you're introducing them the wrong way. But whatever. So when I did my fantasy series, the entire series was done before I actually wrote any of the books. So that's how I was able to control the continuity because it was all already finished. So
Oh,
everything was the continuity. There were no errors with that.
so you essentially created a playground, right, with rules and parameters, and you had the characters play in that playground, and only stay within those rules and parameters.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And
Well,
if there's any and if there was any situation that went outside of those rules, it made sense in the story where like things were leading up to it, the audience can figure it out. Like it didn't just like, oops, this happened. You know what I mean?
right. Like the twist that vampires aren't what they seem, that's introduced in the world as new, right? Because it's new information. It's something that the characters are finding out with the audience. It may have always been true, but it's treated as new because we're going on this journey with the characters.
Yes. And that's something that gets messed up a lot too. Like something will start and the audience will get all this exposition. So you kind of know everything already. Now you're going through the same journey with the characters to see them learning the stuff that you already knew. And that's boring. Nobody likes that. You want to keep the audience a little bit in the dark. The audience is always going to know more because they're seeing from all angles, but you want primarily them to learn the story with the characters. So they go on the journey with the characters.
Yep. And I think a lot of authors trap themselves, especially when coming up with like their magic systems. They trap themselves in thinking, well, magic can only be used for this purpose, and anytime magic is used, I can't just be nonchalant about it or wave it off. I have to mention that this is a magic ability and that it's always been like this and that this is the rule and that there's no violating it.
Yeah, I see that. There's some things, there's some things that I like to just not explain and let people have some imagination, because you want the audience's imagination to do a little bit of the work because you want them to enjoy it their way. So there are some things that I will explain because they need to know for the future of the story, but other stuff, I kind of just leave it up to each person can feel about it or think about it however they want.
And honestly, I think that's a better approach to writing, especially in a written medium where, people can just look ahead and spoil themselves whenever they want to. It's like, nope, you're going to follow this journey just like everybody else.
Yeah. Well, like with the pure fantasy series where the entire thing is in a made up world, there's a lot of things that I describe, but there's two things that I really have no descriptions at all in any of the books, and that's a lot of the clothing and a lot of the architecture. Because the clothing they wear and the architecture means nothing to the story as a whole. So I want the audience to, imagine whatever you want.
Absolutely.
It doesn't affect the greater plot. Let the audience imagine what they think these people might be wearing or what these buildings might look like and stuff like that. I don't know. That's just how I want to approach it. I don't want to waste a lot of words on descriptions that I think people might not care about.
Yes. I noticed that when I was taking a look at your works is that you got straight to the point. For example, in the first chapter of the Eternal Night series, these characters are waking up out of bed. Now, most authors would write this starting to describe the entire world, and they'd spend like 3 or 4 pages of prose describing the flowers outside, the clouds, the smell of each other. Nope, you just get right into the main characters being turned.
Yeah. I mean, that's there's not a lot of filler. That's how that started.
It's just like, fuck you, here's the violence, here's the corpses.
Yeah, and then that was that broke.
Well, with that, we are about halfway through my question, so I think it's time for a groove break. When we come back, we'll dive more into the darkness in Richard's writing, as well as talk about his characters and their dynamics and how this plays into his writing being, as you've called it before, a meat grinder. It's going to be a no-holds-barred discussion that you don't want to miss. You're watching What's Going On with Dapper Don. Stay tuned. You're tuned in to What's Going On with Dapper Don. Don't touch that dial. And we're back. For those of you just tuning in, we just got through discussing what led author Richard Spegal to writing and how he defines and stays consistent with his style. Now we're going to get into this darkness that seems to surround his work and possibly figure out where that comes from. So, tell me, why go the darker route? What about the harshness of real life inspired your works?
I don't go the darker route simply to go in that direction. I go the darker route because it's real. It's the organic journey that the characters are going through, and they go through things that, affect them in a deep way, which turns into some darker areas. It's just the organic growth of the story. It's just where the story goes.
So it's just kind of like you're trying to reflect real life. That's the goal, to portray real life. But like real life, kind of goes dark by accident a lot of the time.
Yeah. And a lot of people, they either don't know how, or they don't think to do it, or they just avoid it. Whereas I want my writing to be real. And that's every aspect of it. And it gets really dark. Characters go into these places where, because of everything they've been through, they can't handle it. I have books where, there'll be multiple characters that'll actually be suicidal because of everything they're handling, and they just can't handle it anymore.
And that's a very interesting thing that you've brought up here, because you don't see that in a lot of modern, even the darker media. You don't see that because a lot of people just don't want to tread on that subject. They don't want to offend anybody. Even if they know how to represent it well, they're just scared to kind of tread water there. So, what kind of made you unafraid to pursue it?
Well, and now this might sound counterintuitive, but when I write, I don't write for the audience. I write for the characters and the story. The characters don't know you're there. They're just living their lives, and they're doing the best that they can. And if you keep it focused that way, then you actually create something that the audience likes more. Most people, they try to pander to the audience. They write something or they create something that they think the audience is going to like. But now you've made something fake because you're making it for someone. I'm not making it for anybody. I'm making it for the characters.
Right. Because you see so many things claiming to be dark and edgy and adult, but then you get into them and they're giving you just enough for you to feel like it, but not enough to offend you, because
right, they're doing darkness just so they can claim that. Like, they want to say, like, we're dark or we're edgy, and I don't do that. If my work is getting dark, it's because that's where the characters are going. Like, it's real. And sometimes it's something they can handle and they can come back from. Sometimes it's not. Like I said, like they'll have a psychotic break, or, they'll contemplate suicide and have to be talked down from it, depending on which book you're reading. It can get pretty bad. But it's the organic growth from what's happened.
Right. Because realistically, somebody being overwhelmed like that, I mean, there's really only a few ways that in humans have handled being overwhelmed.
Exactly. And having my own experience in those darker areas, it allows me to write those pieces a little bit more realistically, a little bit, terrifyingly realistically. But it belongs where it is. Like, when you're reading the story, it doesn't seem out of place. It seems natural.
Right. And I noticed that something in your stories intrigued me, and that's that they don't offer clean, happy endings. It's more like a survive and protect what matters sort of ending. And even then, you're still bruised, battered, and beaten. Why does that resonate with you more than the traditional happy ending, everything's resolved, the town gets rebuilt sort of ending?
Kind of for the same reason as before, because it's real. Even when, even at the end of the story, when they've managed to resolve or do what they needed to do, like they come out of it with more knowledge at what they were trying to find, but they lost a lot along the way because of what they suffered through the conflict. There's no such thing as a clean victory.
And there are a lot of times where you lose things that you're just not going to get back. You'll never get back your innocence. You'll never get back the feeling of, you'll never be able to unfeel pain. You'll never be able to undo mental anguish. Only thing you can do is push forward despite it.
Like at the end of, if we're talking about Eternal Nights and the 2 books that are out there, that's the prequel. And try not to spoil anything. At the very end of the 2nd book, when they have finally survived everything, they've learned everything there is to know. In a lot of ways, the main characters are in a much better position than they've ever been before. In the book, they're just portrayed as just being tired, just exhausted, not being able to go on anymore because of everything that they've just been through. There's an old saying that most people probably don't understand. The only thing worse than a battle won is a battle lost. It's a saying that most people don't understand, but it explains why in that kind of like situation of conflict, you can't go back.
And oftentimes, when you're the victor, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, that means that you're the one basically alive to deal with all the scars, the pain, the guilt, the anguish,
Exactly.
So in some ways you can flip that.
Yeah, that's what that saying means. Like surviving and winning a battle is horrible. The only thing worse than that is if you lost. Either way, it's a terrible situation to be in, and having to deal with all of the death and how to move on from there. And that's what the characters have to figure out.
And I think back to all of these kids that are saying that they cosplay the military. I'm sure you've seen a lot of them. They cosplay the military aesthetic. But I'm assuming you've been in situations where winning was one of the worst things that could have happened to you.
Yeah, the only thing worse would have been losing. It's just how those kinds of things go. But, you have to do it when you're in those situations.
Absolutely. And speaking of those situations, I noticed a lot of strong themes of corruption when it comes to authority, religion, history, systems, the truth. Are you intentionally challenging those, or does that just kind of come out naturally?
That sort of just comes out naturally. A lot of it is just comes down to whatever institution it is, it's being represented by people, and people aren't perfect. So there might be good people in this institution, and there might be bad people in this institution. So that's where there's a lot of corruption and stuff like that, just because I think it fits in naturally with what's going on. Some characters will see that, like, maybe they're on the wrong side of things, so they'll go to the other side and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And I mean, realistically, if we're thinking about a world like yours, a dark world, in order for the world to be dark like that, you'd have to have enough people complacent with the way it is.
Exactly. And the world itself isn't necessarily dark. It's just, from the character's perspective, it is, because they're vampires and everybody seems to want to kill them. So from their perspective, it is a very dark world, but that's not to say that I'm trying to paint like any kind of dystopian future or anything like that. And there's a big religious element as well, where there's a big involvement through the Catholic Church and stuff like that. And I have a lot of corruption and stuff in the stories. But again, that's not painting the institution of the church as being bad. It's just there's individuals in certain positions, you know what I mean, that are not, honest, we'll just say.
Right, exactly. And I mean, it's very interesting because, they're going through this kind of situation that would be horrible for anybody, but also they are among people who are just kind of living their lives. You know, they're in cities. People are standing at bus stops. They're going to work. They're coming home. They're going to movies. It's like it's normal life. But for them in particular, it's a very, very, very trying journey.
Yeah, they just want to be left alone. And nobody will leave them alone. Things just keep happening. And then in the second book, Origins, where they start learning the truth, that one gets really dark and really terrifying. But then they do learn the truth. And then the new books are taking place well into the future, like over 1,000 years into the future, to where the characters are going to be like over 2,000 years old. And that's when the main series takes off.
Absolutely. And that, honestly, I would say that's a great place to start, especially, you know, these characters have something to say and they have a lot of story to tell already. And I think that's honestly a little bit more compelling to me than a character starting from zero.
Yeah.
So, and speaking of progression, you know, readers have cited a progression in how you portray violence, mental illness, and trauma. They say that, you know, for Eternal Nights, for example, the story goes from more explosive violence to more gut-wrenching, realistic violence. Is this something you're doing on purpose?
Again, the story goes where the story goes. For the it's just, you know, you've got the protagonists, you got the antagonists, and they both have their agendas, and things go down the way they go down organically. And then as it explodes into the science fiction series, everything just gets, you know, enormously bigger.
Right, right. And that's a pretty, like, it's not something you're doing on purpose. It's just something that you, again, it's a natural, just you're progressing the story, and it just happens to evolve into that because that's how real life evolves.
Yeah, every character has an agenda, and they stumble upon each other, and like in Eternal Nights, like there are one-on-one conflicts, there are raids, there are battles between dozens of people on both sides. It's all over the place because it flows with what the characters are doing.
Absolutely. And now, why have you described your work? Because I got to know this. Why have you described your work as a meat grinder in the past? What effect on readers are you trying to have?
That was just one of the only ways I could think of, because people would want me to describe things quickly. And a meat grinder is one of the best things I could think of saying to kind of describe what the characters are going through. Like in Origins, the second part of the prequel, that's a meat grinder because the entire book focuses on a very small number of characters that are just screwed throughout the entire book. Just battle after battle, they just, like, it's just all about that. Whereas the first book, it's a little bit more of a natural progression between larger groups of people and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay. That's very interesting. And yeah, I do want to actually get into the characters and the dynamics. And I want to bring up Eternal Nights for a second. Love doesn't really fix anything in that story, but it does make circumstances more bearable. Do you think that is how people should start kind of viewing real life love?
You know, I mean, in my opinion, yeah, because I don't believe in the one perfect character wins. I don't think anybody's perfect. I think we can be in perfect groups. You know, maybe you're in a perfect marriage or a perfect family or something like that, where your weaknesses and strengths are offset by someone else. I can believe that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, none of my characters can survive on their own. They have to be supported by another character. So I do think that love plays a big part in that.
Right. And what's interesting too is that with the vampires in your world, they can experience a version of love, but choose not to. What does that say about how you see people in general?
a lot of that, as far as what the vampires and stuff do, that gets explored later on as they start learning on what vampires really are. But the way it's expressed in the beginning is just that vampires are viewed as creatures that don't have the ability to have positive feelings. So they might be able to experience love over something inanimate, but they can't feel that love for another person.
Right.
With the exception of the two main characters, which are different. But again, the entire concept of vampires in my story gets completely reworked as they begin to study what they are.
Absolutely. And that's I'm gonna pick up the book because I have to see what happens. Because what you're saying is like it's definitely something I'm gonna have to like. I need to get more in depth in that. And speaking of, I want to talk about the Wolves and Ravens trilogy for a sec. So
Okay.
there's a lot of race tension there. How are you kind of portraying that?
A lot of people have asked if I'm intentionally doing like parallels and stuff like that. It's just, again, the story is what the story is. There's a lot of racism and things like that in the story. I'm not trying to parallel anything in the real world. It's just in that story, there is significant racism against the Ravens, which gets really, really nasty as the story progresses.
Yeah. And I mean, realistically, how else would you portray it? It's gonna have to be similar to real life.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be somebody that's being persecuted by other people, and I'm not necessarily trying to draw attention to that. I'm just trying to write good entertainment. You know, I'm not trying to take a political stance or anything like that. Yes, there is enormous racism in those books. It gets, like I said, it gets really nasty before things get resolved. But it's just because it makes for a better story within those books.
Right. Absolutely. And now, kind of piggybacking off of that, what do you think most writers get wrong about portraying race tension and war when they're creating something that's supposed to be read like it's real?
The same thing, they screw up with everything else. They're afraid to do it realistically because they don't want to offend anybody. They try to do it anyway, so they end up just screwing it up from both directions.
Yeah. I was about to say, portraying race tension is going to offend somebody regardless. So you might as well do it right so that people who aren't pussies can actually enjoy it.
I think everybody, if you're not afraid to do it the right way and to make it real, almost everyone will enjoy it because most people will enjoy a real story. You just can't pussyfoot around it. Like, again, like I said, I don't write my stories for the audience. I write my stories so the characters can live their lives and the audience can read it later. And they like it because it's real.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love how how we're coming back to this. It's like, it's interesting because it's like, I don't know, I guess I call it fantastical realism, where it's like, it's in the fantasy genre, technically. It's in the occult genre, but one could also describe it as just very, very real. And I do like the blending of those two things to kind of counteract all the bullshit we've been getting fed. So, in a character-focused work like yours, what is one thing that an author could do that instantly makes you close the book and go like, nah, not finishing this?
As soon as I see the characters fake, which is usually very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And what are the signs that you look for?
When they start talking in a way that a character wouldn't talk. When you have small children talking like adults, that's fake. When you have characters in a fake world suddenly start talking like they're putting forth a political agenda in our world, that's fake. You know, it's just all when you have like a 12-year-old woman who's, you know, somehow smarter than everybody else in the world and stronger than every man around her. That's fake. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's all fake.
Have you guys met preteens and teenagers? Those guys aren't conquering shit.
Yeah. Yeah. When they started doing that whole gender swapping in movies or whatever, and it was just a mess. If the entertainment world was bad enough, and they just made it so much worse.
Oh my God, don't even get me started on the gender swapping bullshit. It's like, I see it, and then I go to the source material, and the guy's a male. They've done the race swapping thing, which is ironically enough something that I view as extremely racist because, you know, why are you trying to pander to me?
Yeah.
Why are you specifically trying to pander to me?
Like, well, so like in Wolves and Ravens, Chin, the Raven Queen,
Mhm.
is a very young woman who actually is like a vicious fighter, but in the book, she's trained like every day of her life in a horrific fashion to be that way. So she's earned it.
Right,
You know, it makes
right.
sense.
But it doesn't make sense for just, well, this is a race of beings where the young for some reason are just like battle hungry monsters. They weren't raised that way. They just are.
Or when they do, and obviously this is more prevalent in visual media, when they do diversity for the sake of diversity, not the realism of what they're portraying. For example, for Wolves and Ravens, geographically speaking, the world is a very, very small place. So if you were to portray this visually, everyone would have to be the same race because there isn't enough geographical separation for there to be different skin colors from the various climate, you know, from the different climate areas on the world. That's science. But I'm sure they would mix all these different colors just so they could, you know, check the diversity block. But it does not make
Oh,
sense.
yeah.
But it doesn't really make sense realistically.
Realistically, if it's cold, skin tones are going to be paler. If it's hot, skin is going to be darker. There's no way around that. That's science.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. It's like, I hate to break it to you, but they just want to put like a flag or something over the movie so that they'll force you to watch it. Otherwise, you're betraying your race. That's how they market it. That's how they portray it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have any final thoughts for our listeners and anyone just wanting to get into writing in your genre in general?
I would say anybody that is trying to be a writer or whatever, just, you know, get yourself ready for an uphill battle. You know, you you gotta put your head to the grindstone or whatever it is they say, because it is not a pleasant industry at all.
No, I imagine not. I imagine you are one of the lucky ones.
It's I have been beating my head against these walls for 15 years, and I've only been successful in the last 4 months. So it is
Oh,
not.
goodness. Oh, oh wow. So the moral of the story is don't publish anything ever. No, I'm
It's you have to be very careful and you have to do your research because most people just want to take your money. You have to do careful research on the company you want to work with and find someone that will do the kinds of things that you want them to do for you. And then you'll have a good relationship and you can build from that.
You know, because I've tried to write before, and I've fallen victim to those. They call them vanity publishers.
Exactly.
They'll say,
Yes.
we're gonna charge you $1,200 for this, and they charge you for it. And you know, I know marketing. I run a goddamn show, for God's sake. So I know when somebody's putting my shit out there because you can search it and look it up and see if they're doing it. And they don't. They do the bare minimum. They maybe make you an Instagram page with like 2 followers, and then they dip if you don't pay them the rest of the $1,200 or the $1,300. And they'll keep charging you. They'll nickel and dime you to death.
Yes. Yeah, you have to be very careful because the idea of getting a traditional publisher, look, if you don't have the right contacts and you're not famous, that's just not something you can ever do. The world has changed. Traditional publishers closed off to normal people. So you have to find someone to do it for you. And if you're somebody that can do the marketing and stuff on your own and you know social media and stuff like that, you can get by. I don't know this crap. I gotta have somebody. I gotta have somebody help me. So I've got a great publicist and a social media manager and all these people that I built relationships with that are helping me be successful.
Absolutely.
It took me a long time to find that, though.
Well, and based on what I was seeing, too, is that they are actually doing what they say they're doing. And I'm assuming that's because you're vetting them every step of the way.
Yeah. I have been taken advantage of more than once these last decade-ish of times. Like I've learned my lessons the hard way. And that's why most independent authors will never be successful, because they get victimized by these other companies.
Yep. And they love bright-eyed new writers who just want to get their work out there and who genuinely care about their readers, because those are the ones that they get to screw over the easiest by promising you the moon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very exciting to get that first book published. Like, you've been working on this book, you see it in print, and it's just an amazing experience. And people will take advantage of that.
Right. Especially when you realize that anybody can go into Photoshop, anybody can go into AI and generate something and put a glossy sheen over it. But if the book's not selling, suddenly that title page doesn't look so glamorous.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, I thank you for coming on. You were a terrific guest. Those technical difficulties earlier will be edited out because whatever. I guess I didn't want myself to sleep tonight. But anywho, thank you for coming on, and I appreciate you. And yeah, I look forward to working with you again if you're open to it.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. But anywho, that's all for today's show. If you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. All my socials will be linked in the description, as well as Mr. Speagal's website. And real quick, where can they get their book? Where can they get their copy of your book? And what can they expect from you in the future?
Well, everything's on Amazon, but I love putting people to the website, richardspegal.com. The publisher gave me video trailers for each book. It's a beautiful website. The new book will be out hopefully by the middle of May, I'm hoping.
Oh, okay. So that's pretty quick. And also beautiful trailers, by the way. So visually stunning.
Yeah, they outdid themselves.
They really did. I mean, my goodness, talk about budget. They must have spent, I can't even imagine, on just the way everything was portrayed. But yeah, that'll be linked in the description, as well as who helped put this episode together. So follow us everywhere so you don't miss a beat, and tune in next Sunday at 6:30 p.m. for an all new What's Going On with Dapper Don. You don't want to miss what I have in store. Peace out.